Welcome to all attendees. We'll give you a second before you all join in. Thank you, Femina, Imran, Siam, Heather, Hina. Thank you for joining. I see Alex as well. Thank you, Alex, for joining in. We're just giving you guys a minute to see and check if the
Hello,
audio
Noor.
is okay. If you can please use the chat box. Hi, Shazdaval. Good to see you again. If you can use the chat box to tell us if you can hear us okay, you can put in a hi. Use the reactions tab as well, right in the bottom of your screens, so that you can give us a thumbs up and we know that you can hear us. Thank you, Sam. Thanks, Femina. Good to see you. Wonderful. All right, welcome everybody to the first ESG live chat. This has been pending for a while, and a lot of you have been requesting us that we should have a pool of experts come and talk about the utmost important thing that is being discussed all across the globe. You would be having a lot of individual discussions, corporate discussions, discussions with your peers, with your colleagues with regards to what is happening on the ESG side. Where are the reportings coming from? What are we doing as the world and as the global footprint to understand and ensure that all of our practices are aligned and they follow the ESG frameworks? There are numerous frameworks that are being talked about and spoken about. So what we have done is that we are bringing you the ESG Live Cast series. Why am I saying a series? Because this is the first introductory session that we'll be doing today. And then going forward with each interval, we are trying and aiming that we bring subject matter experts, sectoral experts who have spent years and years discussing the topic, doing researches, doing projects that have been effective, and they can actually take these learnings and you guys can take these learnings forward and try to implement. So I am pleased to welcome all of you. Let me also start off with who were actually the brainchild behind getting these initiatives across to you. So my name is Noor. I am representing Mindworks International. That's my organization. And I'm so glad that the Brown Network has taken the initiative. Waqas is right here. If he can also wave hi, he's the CEO. His team is also here of bringing these discussions to life. We all understand the importance of continuous professional development and ensuring that our discussions are based, that are laser focused, and we can help out the community in terms of giving back. So extremely delighted that we have a series of organizations that have also partnered with us, and a lot of their representatives are also here. But just to give you a few names that we wanted to shape the future of sustainability. We do understand, again, the kind of impact that everybody is seeing around themselves. We have recently also wrapped up a fantastic climate change fellowship just roughly a month ago as well. And we have seen how people have come to us in terms of asking us for more concerted efforts on the ESG frameworks as well. So just to mention all of our collaborative partners, the IFRS Lab, HermsNet Limited, and Cognition Hub. I know Hina is here as well. She's representing Cognition Hub, and we have our other leaders also who are representing their individual organizations. So let me quickly take you through what the agenda is going to look like. So what is this 1 hour that we are spending here? We have fantastic speakers who have actually taken out their time looking at all of the disruptions that we have had, but we're still here to bring this webinar to you. So very quickly giving you an introduction of who do we have, the lineup of speakers. We have our keynote speaker, Ms. Zonish Inayat, who's the additional joint director with the SECP. Thank you so much, ma'am. I know you've gone through, literal miles to, be at this webinar. So I'll be coming around, popping around to you very soon. And then we have Asad Mahmood, who is sustainability expert. He specializes with the mitigation and adaptation area. So Asad sir, hello, hi, if you can wave so that we can see that you are here and everybody can know, yes, there you are. I'm also joined with Mr. Osman, who is the energy efficiency consultant. Osman, good to see you here as well. And I look forward to hearing from you. We do also have another speaker, but we are trying to see whether we would be in touch with Noman Sab as well. So Shafaq at the background is in touch with him. But with the internet disruption, I think we are unable to get him. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Looking at what are some of the areas as part of the first webinar series? What are we going to discuss today? And I want this session to be as interactive as possible. We have some, a little bit of polls also that we'll be doing. So while I'm making the introduction and telling you the topics, if all of the attendees online can tell us who they are, just make your introductions in the chat box so our speakers can also get to know you, and tell us a little bit as to what your initiatives are and what you're working on so that we can make this particular webinar as interactive as possible. So today we're going to talk about, just the fundamentals and the strategic importance of what ESG is. Why is it the pain point of a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of government organizations? Why is everybody concerned about the global ESG frameworks and standards? What is being done at an international level to build up these standards, and then what we are doing as a nation to nationalize these standards? That's where Zonish, I'd like to hear from you as to what is being done in terms of reporting guidelines that SECP has been working on for a really long time. Where have we come around on those? So we'd love to hear that. We'll also be discussing some common, I would like to say, not challenges, but a little bit of hurdles that we see with organizations when it comes to ESG and its implementation. So that's also something that we'd be setting the tone for this. And finally, the worth, the plethora of resources and tools that are available. I like both Usman and Asad Saab to, mention and tell us that what are some of the tools, because that's where I get stuck, that which tool should we be using in terms of all the options and all of the choices that we have. So good to see you, everybody. Alex, thank you so much. And do also tell us which part of the world you are joining us from. So that'll be really exciting for us to know. Siam, good to see you. All right, wonderful. So a lot of researches. So without further ado, I'd like to go on to Zonish. Zonish, if you could tell us where we are in terms of, ESG being a topic specifically for Pakistan, where are we in terms of, SECP being a key stakeholder in this entire nationalization process, and where our national adaptability plans are actually concerned? Where does the ESG stand as a main key mandate? So over to you, Zonish.
Okay, thank you so much, Noor, for that warm introduction, and a big shout out to all our distinguished participants. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. So I'm really grateful to the Brown Network, MindWorks, IFRS Lab, Ms. Nat, and Cognition Hub for organizing this very timely webinar series on ESG. Before I start, I would like to say that as we reflect on the challenges of the past, it is certainly evident that collaboration is key to building a sustainable future. And this webinar series is indeed a welcoming initiative. So I'm actually very happy to be speaking here at this webinar. So if we have a global perspective, you would realize that global trends show that environmental stewardship or corporate social responsibility and good governance are no longer just a buzzword, but they are actually essential for the long-term success of, all the entities. So as both the corporate registrar and securities market regulator, the SECP is committed to creating a regulatory environment that considers the environment, encourages corporate social responsibility, and lastly, but most importantly, promotes the good governance. So I would first talk about the environmental impact, as it is one of the main pillars of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, as we all know. And Pakistan, unfortunately, like many other developing countries, is lagging behind. So as per the recent World Bank climate-related, there is this report by the World Bank in which it says that climate-related risks could reduce our GDP by a whopping 18 to 20% by 2050. So that is actually a wake-up call for all of us to actually start doing some significant work. So, on the ESG side, on the social responsibility arena, the SECP introduced the guidelines for corporate social responsibility back in 2013. These guidelines are voluntary, but they served as a roadmap for companies to make a positive impact on their communities. Hope most of you would be aware about our corporate social responsibility guidelines. So, coming to the governance side, corporate governance is also all about encouraging compliance rather than just relying on regulations. So the companies should basically hold themselves accountable to their shareholders and investors by reporting their economic, environmental, and social impacts. So basically, this can lead to better risk management and cost optimization, and of course, improved decision making and a stronger reputation. So one of the benefits, as you would see, is a stronger reputation that a company is actually reporting on the ESG side. Okay, so the next thing I would talk about is the inclusivity. That is why the SECP has mandated female representation on company boards and is working to create a more conducive work environment for all. So I'm happy to report that around 90% of listed companies here in Pakistan now have at least one female director on board. I will be going towards the ESG guidelines, as I know most of you would be most interested in the disclosure guidelines that we have recently issued in June 2024. So at the SECP, we are closely monitoring the global ESG trends to ensure that investors have access to consistent and comparable information about sustainability related risks and opportunities. So this whole process actually began back in June 2022, where we issued an ESG position paper in which we introduced this ESG regulatory roadmap to start the conversation around ESG. And we have been very actively engaging with all the relevant stakeholders, the Pakistan Stock Exchange, PICG, and multilaterals, different and donor agencies, and the corporate sector itself, because you would be conducting the sectoral discussion later on. So for that, we have been working actively in collaboration with our relevant stakeholders. So if you want me to display a slide on ESG guidelines, I can do that. Otherwise, due to some bandwidth limitations, if you allow me to speak as it is. So please tell me how to go about it.
We can carry on, Zonish, and we'll have the handout made available. If you could send that to us and later, and we'll have it sent out to all of the attendees, and we could put it as part of the edit phase that we do.
Okay, sure. So I'll go as it is. So I'll be talking about the ESG disclosure guidelines. So we issued these guidelines back in June 2024 after a very thorough consultative process with the public and our key stakeholders. So basically, these guidelines are currently voluntary for adoption. So the first thing, what's the objective of introducing these guidelines? Number one, it is to improve transparency in companies' operation. Number two, to integrate sustainability into businesses to reduce environmental impact. And number three is to help investors make informed decisions. So these guidelines are currently applicable on the listed companies, but of course, unlisted companies may also take guidance to embark on their ESG journey. There are certain unlisted companies as well who are doing very well on ESG arena. So if we talk about the reporting formats, the companies can use any of the three reporting formats. For reporting their ESG performance, they can make it part of their annual report, or they can make a standalone or a separate sustainability report to showcase their ESG related activities. or they can just make online disclosures through their website. So we have given maximum flexibility to the companies to actually encourage them to embark on their ESG journey. So it's not very, burdensome for them to adopt a particular reporting format, because it could be costly, or it could be, we're not right now where everyone is at the same page in terms of the understanding on ESG matters. So in the ESG disclosure guidelines, we have, mentioned the key ESG reporting considerations where the companies will be reporting. Number one is the governance aspect, which includes the processes, controls, and procedures to monitor and manage sustainability-related risks and opportunities of the relevant company. Then there comes the strategy, which is basically the approach for addressing sustainability-related risks and opportunities. The poll one is, I think, live. So should I keep on talking?
Yes, please go on ahead, because I just want to take from our audience as to what everybody's key ideas would be, because you're talking
Okay, so
about
they can
companies.
basically fill it simultaneously. Okay, so I would
Absolutely.
stop. Okay, great. Okay, so I was talking about the strategy, which is basically the approach for addressing sustainability-related risks and opportunities that could affect the business model and strategy of the company over the short, medium, and long term. Then there comes the risk management thing. Asha, if you could see, or some of you are aware, these four key reporting considerations are also part of the ISSB, S1 and S2. If you really look into S1, that has been recently issued by the ISSB board. So we have adopted the same reporting considerations, where in the risk management side, it basically relates to the processes to identify, assess, and manage risk. And lastly, this pillar relates to the matrix and targets, because of course you have to set a certain target to meet, and for this you have to reflect certain matrix. So the information used to assess, manage, and monitor performance of sustainability related risks and opportunities of the company. So, lastly, I would be briefly touching upon the ESG pillars. So, under the environmental pillar, we have given the matrix related to GHG emissions, emissions intensity, energy usage, energy intensity, or the energy mix. Then there comes water usage, environmental operations, environmental oversight. Of course, the responsibility of the board and the management is very important, because they have to basically set the tone and to lead this agenda. So then comes the climate risk mitigation and adaptation strategy in the sustainable sourcing. Then under the social pillar, we have CEO pay ratio, gender pay ratio, employee turnover, gender diversity, temporary worker ratio, non-discrimination, injury rate, global health and safety, child and forced labor, human rights, marketing, employee training and succession planning, and the working conditions. Lastly, for the G pillar, we have included the board diversity, board independence, as we have already discussed a bit about the presence of female board members on the boards of listed companies. Then there comes the incentivized pay, collective bargaining, supplier code of conduct, ethics and anti-corruption, data privacy, sustainable reporting, disclosure practices, external assurance, and board competence, where we are encouraging board members who are well versed with the whole ESG thing. So if we talk about the reporting frameworks or standards, we have also given the liberty to companies, like they can use the global reporting initiatives, or they can start using the ISSB standards S1 and S2. But of course, as a global baseline, we are encouraging companies to basically adopt ISSB standards. So this was all about the ESG disclosure guidelines that we have recently issued. Well, this didn't come alone without any, if we could see, we have also made certain amendments in the Code of Corporate Governance, so to create a more responsible and equitable business environment. So the amendments in the Code of Corporate Governance basically mandate comprehensive anti-harassment policies, promote gender equality, and encourage board to adopt a proactive approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I would also like to touch upon the fact that we have also recommended the listed companies to have a sustainability committee, or if they think they do not have the capacity or their strategy does not align well, so they can make any of their existing committee, be it risk, audit, or the remuneration or any other committee, responsible for the ESG related matters. So that's all about from my side. In conclusion, I just want to commend the host for organizing this webinar. And on behalf of the SECP, I assure you of our commitment. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zonish. I think very nicely covered in terms of, all that the SECP is doing. And it was heartening to see that from 2013, we have come a long way. It has taken more than almost a decade for us to review the guidelines again, and just, look at ways in which we make it easier for companies to also look at ways in which they can benefit from integrating the ESG practices as well. I do
Exactly.
know for a
No,
fact
so
that,
I just wanted to add that we have basically graduated from the CSR guidelines to the ESG ones
absolutely.
because they're more comprehensive. So we are anticipating companies and the corporate entities and other stakeholders to adopt them. So I just wanted to add that.
Absolutely. I remember the first consultative session in 2013 that took place with SIPE when we were launching the CSR guidelines. And again, the discussion at that time was also that, yes, we have kept the reporting voluntary for the organizations to just look at how they can implement these practices. But the benefits uh, stand true, many different dimensions, and there are different aspects of this is essentially why I had put up the poll, and it was exciting. Thank you for everyone to participate, and there'll be more polls coming in as well. But the results, I'm sure all of you can see right here. And this was a trick question, by the way, because I'd said ये हमने नहीं लिखना था, select all that apply, but that's my bad, Saima, no worries. But essentially, just looking at all of these things that benefit organizations, and I'm sure as part of this webinar and many more to follow, we'll be looking at ways in which organizations can actually benefit in real life case studies where you can see the business impact and the ESG impact go hand in hand. So, Usman, this brings me first to the first question that we have. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so, Zonish. Thank you so much for your time. I know you were traveling and you took out time. You had really bad internet, but thank you so much for your time. We look forward for these guidelines, and we'll send it across to each of the attendees of the webinars as well.
Okay,
So
thank
just
you, Noor. Thank you so much. I just wanted to add something. If any participant has any question regarding the ESG guidelines or any of the efforts of the SECP, so they can basically ask me or they can post it later on. So because, as you know, I have a difficult situation, so I'll be quitting soon. So if there are any question, I would be happy to address right away.
no worries. Wonderful. I think we can carry on that discussion in the chat box if you have any specific questions for Zonish. And meanwhile, we'll carry on with the discussion. So, yes, Usman, just building up on the first poll question, but I'm just going to bring it round to you. There has to be a lot of, discussion and disclosure when we look at ESG. But what are some of the fundamental pillars that you would say that an ESG framework or a plan should encompass? And why is it important for businesses to actually have those principles embedded as part of their business strategy?
First of all, Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for inviting me to this session. It's enlightening, enlightening for a lot of us, and the participants, and I hope the discussion that we are going to have today, is going to be fruitful for a lot of participants. In terms of the question that you asked for, in the poll, the first thing that we need to look at is, the favorable conditions for the ESG implementation. Now, if you look at what Zonish had mentioned, and what SECP has done in last 4 years, particularly in Pakistan only, the flexibility, the guidance, and the amount of effort SECP has put in, for companies to come in, and implement ESG, that is really commendable. So thank you to SECP and the partners and all concerned who have made a collaborated effort in there. Now, what is the main issue that we have, or the main issue that we are facing in terms of implementation? As far as I am concerned, the main issue that we are facing, or most businesses are facing, is in relation to the education, okay, of ESG. Because a lot of businesses do not understand what are the preliminary requirements, if you were a business in any part of the world in relation to that. Because ESG is being presented as such a humongous task, so that, any business who's trying or who's willing to implement ESG is thinking that, there are a lot of hoops involved in it. Yes, there are a lot of hoops involved in it, but there has to be a starting point. Now, in terms of that starting point, and I'm just giving a bit of brief background on this, Noor, on the question that you asked, that, the starting point needs to be education on ESG, and basic simple education, okay, in terms of what is involved in ESG, okay. There are a lot of guides that have been prepared, which are simple layman guides that explain what ESG actually entails. And within that guide, or within that first step that we can look at, or what we need to look at, is the environmental side. And that can be simple things like, how are we, or how is our business affecting, the environment, and what can be done in relation to, sort of implementation of that ESG strategy. So point being that the first thing that we need to look at is the education of masses. And then the second thing that we need to look at is, starting point again, from my perspective, is start from the environmental side, the environmental impacts that we are having, as businesses, as individuals, and so on and so forth. I mean, if you look at the GCC countries, Middle East, UAE, Oman, Bahrain, they have already started implementing the ESG strategies. There is a requirement in some countries. It is not mandatory, but in other countries, it has become, the reporting has become mandatory. But along the same lines, the businesses from various different industries need to pick and choose as to where they want to go. But like I said, from my perspective, the first stepping stone needs to be education of masses, and followed by, looking at the environmental strategy as to how we would move forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Osman. And that's actually the very important aspect in what you're saying is that there has to be some kind of like your foundation work that you're saying in terms of understanding and educating the whole team. I know Farooq Saab is here. He's representing Best Way. This is what happens when you make your introductions in the group chat. So those of you who've joined us late, please do make the introduction so that we will be able to connect and understand and see the relevance of the discussion, and then we can steer the direction, the discussion in that direction, where we can have different experts come in and speak about that. Asad, this brings me to you, what Osman is saying in terms of the education. Now, looking at the various different frameworks that we've been talking about for a while, there are many. There are many disclosure frameworks. There are many frameworks that essentially guide organizations in terms of their sustainability reporting structures. GRI is very comprehensive. Integrated reporting structures are really comprehensive. There are others as well. Which and what spectrum of ESG framework disclosures are the ones which could be like the low-hanging fruit for various organizations to start off with? what is that first framework, or maybe if I was to, frame it correctly, that what should be the first thread that organizations would be interested in picking up and then starting off from that?
Well, I think very important points have been shared by Osman Saab, and you also have mentioned a few important aspects. And definitely, there is a sort of there are different frameworks and the standards, but at the end of the day, I'll take one step back. There are like companies which are listed on stock exchange or listed companies that have to comply with the ESG reporting and things like that. But we also need to look into bringing in the companies, progressive companies, making them able to understand the basics of ESG reporting. And I think it all starts from the very basic level. And I think tomorrow or day after tomorrow, we'll be having that sort of tool launched by SECP, where the companies can at least see the local tailor-made sort of structure where they have to report various parameters. But again, like there are many building blocks when we talk about ESG. It's something like we need to see when we talk about ESG reporting, the immediate thing which comes into the mind is like focusing on the ISO standards and certifications and things like that. So having said so, those organizations which are familiar with sort of different carrying out different management system audits and reporting, so they would be the first ones which can really understand like all the aspects of ESG aspects and the relevant ISO standards that could be chipped in. And the simplest one is basically in Pakistan perspective is the quality management system, where a lot of trust was there. And I think with the youngsters in the teams in the organizations like Farooq and other participants whom I know and met, they are very hard, like they are the critical backbones in making the things happen. So again, having the relevant people in the organizations also matter a lot, who understand the gist and basics of like ESG reporting, and not only to comply with the SECP regulations, but also to enhance the sort of their projections or their products or their and their day-to-day business affairs whenever they speak at international levels or present. And export-oriented sector, definitely it's something like a compulsion that would be coming up. And as I also say at different platforms, that after 2030, world is going to split into like two parts: those complying with all the so-called like international standards and the compliance related aspects which we have to look into. And secondly, I think that SECP and this consortium which is working now, they have a very important role to play in order to keep the momentum going. And definitely, at the end of the day, those who are implementing these things are something which have to take the lead. And specifically, like some of the important ESG parameters, like GHG inventory is coming up very quickly to be reported as an energy intensity and things like that. So I think all these things could not, these numbers don't come on their own. And there has to be there are certain certifications programs, energy audits, environmental audits. A lot of work has to be done to just get that one report which has transparency, and one can then say on the basis of reports and skill sets that the organization or the company is complying with all those standards. So it's just easier said than done sort of thing, because once you go on that track, we need to see into the integrated management system approach. There used to be earlier, when there were 2 or 3 standards very commonly known in the industries in Pakistan, like ISO 14000, ISO 9000, and then came ISO 50001 and things like that. But there are other governance related and social aspects related codes and standards that have yet to be promulgated or have to be taken on. Like there have to be a sort of wide scale adoption and acceptance by the organizations to really get going the market related to ESG, and the consulting side has a very important role to play apart from the organizations and their sustainability focal persons. So I'll just stop over here and then we'll pitch on the discussion from there onwards.
Absolutely, Asad Saab, and a very, I think very beautifully you have summarized what should be the goal for actually businesses as well. And I'll just like to touch base on what you said about, the compliances become mandatory a lot when we are looking at the exports. Any organization that's looking at exporting their services, their products, their goods, it is, why we should be looking at they should be the ones looking at adopting these ESG practices. So there's another poll on. I can see how many of you have voted. So those of you who haven't, please do that, because this was just for us to, play the devil's advocate in terms of what challenges or what possible hurdles do organizations feel. And I think, Asisa, what you had also mentioned, that we went from the ISOs to the actual very comprehensive frameworks and standards quite quickly. And for most organizations, we do have accountants herein as well, whose mandate it is to actually generate these reports. But then the concept of having a separated ESG department, or maybe subject matter experts that are actually supposed to work on sustainability initiatives. Osman, you spoke about the education bit, as in to allowing professionals to, understand the standards themselves, pick up the ones and the level at which they should be implementing that in their organizations. But I want to bring both of you speakers back on the poll, and I'm going to share the results very soon because they're really close. What are some of the prospective challenges? Where do we feel that organizations feel that what's in it for us? Business is going on, everything's great. Like Asad was saying, that in terms of when we look at exports, that is where it makes the most sense. And we have numerous case studies from Pakistan of companies that have done phenomenally well. Just very recently, just this week, earlier in the week, I was reading about Interloop getting the AWS allowance for water stewardship standards, which Asad also spoke about, becoming the first company in the textile sector to actually have that particular certification. It has to come with a financial and a business benefit. Osman, what are your thoughts on this? Looking at the poll results, all of these are applicable when we look at the businesses side of thing and what the key stakeholders might be looking at it. But where does the actual essential benefit lies for organizations? For if the C-level, if the top management has to convince somebody that investments needs to be made in the sustainability processes, what should their pitch be like?
Okay, so I'll give you an analogy here. When a child is born, we give them whatever they like to eat. We feed them, chicken, we give them rice, we give them chapati, we give them roti, whatever, is there. And as they progress, we say, mashallah, hamara bacha kitna healthy ho gaya hai, and as they progress, once they get into their teens, and when the waistline starts to increase, at that point, then we start saying, oh, kitna mota ho gaya hai hamara bacha, and as we get into our 20s and 30s, we get engulfed in different ailments like diabetes, high blood pressure, and so on and so forth. You go and visit the doctor, and at that point in time, the doctor tells you that, look, you're now suffering from high blood pressure or diabetes or something. If you don't take care of yourself, now you're gonna suffer more health issues or risk and heart diseases and so on and so forth moving forward if you don't look after yourself now. So conversely, this is a no-brainer. Okay, as far as businesses are concerned, so I gave you that analogy that, if we don't look after that business, we don't look after the industry, we don't look after the environment, we'll come to a point where, we will not be able to operate, or we will not be able to do anything, in terms of the business. So, like I said, this is a no-brainer. So this is a no-brainer, like I said. So the implementation of it, again, I would go back to the basics, that the owners, the business owners, the senior leadership needs to be educated. Because let's be very, very honest, if we ran a poll now, with the audience that we have, I can see there are 19 participants, including all of us. And if we ask them, honestly, what does ESG actually entail? How many components does it actually have? I can bet my bottom dollar on it that not very many people will be able to answer that question accurately. So, like I said, one no-brainer, it needs to be implemented, because that is the order of the day. And secondly, the people need to be educated, especially the stakeholders and the companies, and the senior leadership as to, what does it have, and because of the seminars and the consortiums that we are building around, this will educate people as to what it actually entails. And just like rightly Asad Saab mentioned, I mean, there are so many components in there which, can be implemented in an easy manner. And before that, Zonish mentioned as well that, how easy has it been made by SECP. Let's talk about simple thing like, what standards do we implement? So SECP has said that, look, you can go after any standard as long as there is some implementation. There are companies in there. So you can talk about Angro. Angro started some implementation in terms of ESG. Habib Bank has done something, Mizan Bank has done something. So there are, businesses out there who are obviously trying to implement ESG. But the point being that, it is the individual business owners and it is the individual industry. If you go to, I mean, textile is one example, but if you go into the paper industry, there has to be an element of implementation of ESG, because, the society and the environment that we are living in today, a child who's born today, 50 years from now, we might not be living, but, that child will have a difficult, environment in terms of breathing and respiratory issues, around them, 50 years from now on. So, like I said, it is very important for us to educate ourselves and to look at, what is included in here.
Right. Thank you so much, Usman. Asad, I'll just pop on to you as well. I think the same question as well. For the top management to actually sit down and think about why there should be an investment into the sustainability and reporting structures. What do you think should be the absolute goal in which, or what should be the pitch deck for these top management to get a convincing statement from their management that there should be investment into the ESG frameworks, discussions, education, implementation? Is Asad still there? Yeah, I can.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I switched to the other device, so there is some. So, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So I missed some the question in fact because I was having some internet fluctuation over here. So, but while I have also seen some of the comments in it in for the enabling environment, I think that was being discussed. What's there for the higher ups in the organizations in order to make a win-win situation and the case where they can go for ESG certifications, ESG reporting and compliance. So
again in technical glitch. So as Farooq has mentioned that like it's the role of first of all the government entities because of the present economic meltdown or the situation which the industries are facing these days. So I think like it's there have been certain programs which I also like worked out from UNIDO platform or Jeff funding facility where ISO 50001 certifications were promoted. And similarly, like there are certain platforms where like a hand holding, not only in the sense of the initial capex, which is attributed towards the certification costs of different standards, getting the people trained on international reporting standards. So they need some forex and they need like they need local training. So I think that if we or any consortium or SECP can play that role by bringing in those international standard bodies or frameworks in Pakistan, and we can have some sort of discounted rate. So that could be a very sort of starting point for many of the entities getting the financial facilitation, because many of the ESG representatives or CSR focal persons, they would be interested to go for these things, but at the end of the day, the management might not allocate certain those specific amounts which are or the fees which are basically which are related to the certifications. Just like for example, what one of the enabling environment which we are negotiating as I'm also looking into IFC at building at certifications. So that generates a self compliant ESG report, which the entities can use and submit as a part of their sort of overall annual reports. So the point is like where there we first of all have to train the people to first of all understand the standards, apps, softwares, whatsoever are there in the market. So we need like all these things need digitalization at the end of the day, all these reportings. So and those public good platforms, open source platforms, be it we and now the SECP, I think and I hope that they have that public source platform without the limitation of the internet sort of storage limits and things like that. But at the end of the day, like all these digitalization aspects have to be kept in mind, and facilitation has to be given to the relevant focal interested parties in terms of capacity building of their nominated officials, and at least then and those have to be sort of given the backup by the relevant boards of the company. So boards also have to take this responsibility of getting all their team members trained across ESG elements and the relevant prevailing standards.
Absolutely, Asad Saab, and I'm going to put you another question over here, which Farooq has rightly questioned, because we're looking at how organizations, and you're also talking about the same, that doesn't make business sense. Compliance has been there, it has been left voluntarily. वो हम कितने अरसे से कह रहे हैं कि जब तक कोई उसके ऊपर कोई एक mandatory stamp नहीं लगती, when we leave it to the organizations for a voluntary thing, then always the question comes around to the fact that does it make business sense? So I like your thoughts on this, Asad Saab, first, and then I'll move to Usman.
Well, in terms of the business sense, it all depends like which sectors we have to first of all like focus upon the selective sectors which really make the business sense. And those, as I just initially also highlighted those points, that there are certain sectors which have the potential to go for like to go for the international sort of markets, and we need to give them the hand holdings and to keep them complying with the upcoming new plethora of the standards coming up under CBAM and other things. So it is ultimately going to help them to help the industries to just like enter into phases from jogging phase to walking phase and walking phase to running phase. So this is something like and as also like Usman Sir mentioned that like you need to start off with one of the element in which you have the strength, the relevant organizations and the thrust of the government counterparts and the chamber of commerce and industries, where they, being the important stakeholders in it, they have to play their role, and those sectors which really have potential to transform and that can really attribute towards making business sense. We need to focus on those to have a win-win situation. We need champions sort of things in all these things, in all
Yeah,
these sectors which we are going to discuss in these series.
wonderful. And I'll just like to add on to what you're saying, Asad Saab, that uh, it is also about picking and choosing which aspect of the reporting makes sense for a business. And then it also is about consistency. If we go around the history of sustainability reporting in Pakistan, I can recall working back in 2009 when we were looking at, what reward mechanisms can be there for the private sector to come on board, disclose their sustainability or environmental reporting. And there still are a handful of companies that have been going through the process, even in a voluntary capacity, um, and reporting on their disclosures. They have picked up certain frameworks and they have been reporting. And I like to quote some here for those of you who would want to re-corroborate my information and go check back on these organizations. So look at what ARL has been doing for the longest time in terms of sustainability reporting. Karshi Industry has been reporting on their environmental practices for decades now. So look through every year the the environmental report comes out where they mention as part of their accolades in terms of what business they have been able to attract from these foreign collaborations and exports, like we're saying. Also, you mentioned Usman, you mentioned about Engro Corp being one of the I think the leaders in terms of getting ahead with an integrated report following the IR framework. So there are many examples of organizations that have actually built up on this particular area. I am very cognizant of time also. So Shafaq, if you can PM me as to how much I can extend the webinar, or if I have to close it at an hour mark, we can carry on for another hour. But Usman, this brings me back to asking you the final question for today's live cast, and we'll be building up on getting these sectoral insights in place as well. For the education, where do we start off from? I know Asad has mentioned that he's working on certain programs. I'm sure they're for the private sector individuals as well, backed with some donor collaborations as well, where private sector should be the focus in terms. The government also comes on board, and the donor brings in the money where the education part can be given, like you're saying. What other initiatives can organizations take other than education within their organization's mandate that they should work around getting started and having these board discussions on ESG?
Asad Saab has shed a lot of light on this as to different programs. Now, if you look at the industry around us, and these are names that we hear every single day. So let's talk about K Electric. Okay, K Electric has picked up ESG. Okay, despite its financial issues, despite its operational issues. You hear every single day that there are protests taking place outside K Electric's head office. However, they have picked up two elements. Okay, number one, under ESG, number one is the renewable energy. They have said that, okay, fine, we are going to look at ESG as renewable energy. Okay, that is going to be our first component. Then they have looked at it and they have said that, we will look at consumer engagement. Okay, so in terms of, community development. Okay, so they have picked those two elements in there. So because, like I said earlier on in response to the previous question that I was asked, that, ESG, can be a minefield depending on which industry you are targeting. Hence why it is very important that, one, we look at educating the people involved, whether that be the masses, that be the consumer, that be the board members, that be the senior management, junior management, middle tier management. And second thing is that, at this point in time is voluntary. Okay, so we pick up an element and we can start moving on there. Then the second example that we have is Lucky Cement. Okay, again, an everyday name that we hear. They have said that, okay, fine, we will not implement ESG 100% to its core. However, what we are going to do is that we will pick up certain elements from that ESG and we will look into it and we will start promoting ESG through those. Now, what are those initiatives? Okay, number one is carbon emissions, okay, carbon reductions. And number two, that their social initiatives as to what they can do with certain elements of the society. I know that they're working with, a certain rehab, where, people who are into drug addiction and so on and so forth. So they're working on that and helping reduce the carbon emissions. So the point being that, the whole idea about, what's in it for the senior management or the businessman or the business owner, or whether it's a mandatory element or not. Okay, I can sit here and give you analogies, all day long. If you talk about, slightly going off the subject or the topic, but if you look at the Safe City in Lahore, so the Safe City project, even if you are at a red traffic light, okay, and you try and edge your car forward, whereby there is a white line there, okay, and if your tires are on that white line, they issue you a fine. Okay, we all know that. We comply. We make sure that we stop our vehicles behind that white line. So if there are, compliance issues, in there, if there are no effective compliance in the ESG market, okay, this will always for lifelong, our grandchildren can come here and this will still be a voluntary scheme. Okay, so we need to take into account the long-term goals and long-term effectiveness of ESG implementation as to what we will be able to achieve. And like I said to you, 50 years from on, if we don't take the right steps today, the decision makers who are sitting there, if they don't make the right decisions today, we are going to have issues 50 years from now on. And our children and our grandchildren, will be facing issues in terms of the environment. So going back to the basics, education, and also making sure that, this is a good thing to have. ESG is not like a tax or a burden or something like that. It's something that we should have in there. And the advocacy level, on the government, Zonish has already mentioned about the steps SECP is taking, so there should be more advocacy from people like ourselves, about ESG, and only then that this can move forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Usman. Asad Saab, I'll move on to you for some final comments. I was sharing the poll results, but I would want that these poll results should be here and we just look at who's likely to be more affected in a positive way or influenced in a positive way with the company's ESG performance. So I like some final thoughts from you, Asad Saab, and then there is one or two questions that I'll definitely like to take. And if our attendees, if you have any more questions, please feel free to type into the chat box because we'll move on to them. But Asad Saab, before we go forward, which of the four do you think are the most influenced out of the four that you see on the screen?
Well, I think it's the initial perspective which is towards like investor side, but again the customers, until unless you don't educate your customers, so it's a pull and push system we need to look at the end of the day. So as I just mentioned that we need to develop that environment in which the natural organic pull comes in, just like as mentioned by Osman Saab, he has given CIMIT specific examples and best way, and others also, they have been doing good work in terms of CSR and transforming those CSR interventions and expanding bringing it into the broader context of ESG, and similarly other sector initiators are also coming up very quickly, like OGDCL is also coming up with their ESG report this year, and with the specific focus on what is being required by under the international charters, and what has to be complied in terms of in Pakistan's context. I'm not able to see the screen which you were referring to.
No worries.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're
not muted.
Yeah. So my submission is like we need to factor in, make a repository of all the best practices in the context of ESG, and definitely like there is a huge thrust on the GHG inventory side, as I've just mentioned, and that and there is something like where like again, as one of the queries there, that scope 3 emissions are something which is not easily doable, but there is a strong international requirement coming up. So we need to prioritize all those things which are coming up very quickly from international level, as per international requirements, and what enabling environment could the local government counterparts can give, and SECP or other relevant entities like GCIC can give to those organizations which really want to keep abreast with the emerging, popping out international compliance requirements to just keep their orders secured.
Right, absolutely. So thank you so much, Asad Saab. I think very rightly directed in the direction where we wanted to head for this particular webinar. There was one question on climate finance mitigation, which I think would be most relevant when we have a pool of climate finance experts perhaps sitting on the board. But I'd like to just sum up what all of the discussion that's taken place today, from education on the ESG principles to understanding the core components and the principles, and also looking at ways in which framework discussions could be done to keep the business interest in mind. I appreciate Farooq also mentioning that uh, organizations which are on the brink right now, to just understand that where should we be starting off, and does it make business case, or is it an additional responsibility on, let's say, the finance team to figure out a way and a mechanism in which they have to report on the sustainability practices as well. Usman, you also mentioned about, there's already ongoing CSR activities that organizations are doing. There is a lot of community development that takes place in different organizations, but now it's more about connecting those initiatives and those practices to actual financial business growth. That is the main objective as well. So I think a lot of concerted discussions have actually set the tone for the ESG Livecast series that we're going to do now from here onwards, in terms of sectoral discussions, where a lot of best practices from different sectors would be shared. And we would encourage all of you who are here online and those who will be joining us later, that do spend 1 hour once a week on a Saturday to look at ways in which we could, put these learnings into practice. Like Usman has been mentioning, we are doing this education and more advocacy and more discussions as part of the series. So we would definitely be in a space to take these things forward. I know Waqas wants to say something, and I was automatically going on to him because he was spotlighted. But I would like to, thank Zonish, Osman, and Asad for being here, taking out your time, and all the other attendees as well. But this is not a formal closure. I'll move on to Waqas and then we'll close. Ji.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you so much, Noor. Especially thankful to Zonish for providing the valuable insights into the regulatory landscape and highlighting the importance of ESG practices. Their guidance shows us how innovation and compliance can work together for all the sustainable progresses, right? I also want to express my gratitude to the partners, especially SSR, who actually got all of us together, and Noor from Mindworks, Hina from Cognition Hub, Osman Saab representing the IFRC lab, and Aman from the Hermanstead. All of your commitment are the key to driving the ESG agenda forward across the different sectors. As we hear from the SECP and our partners today, like Osman Saab was speaking and all the insights that Asad was sharing, one thing becomes very clear. The collaboration is very essential for integrating the ESG into the business strategies, right? Together, we are not just following the rules, but also setting the new standards for the sustainable growth. With the insights shared today, I'm very confident that we will be better equipped to navigate the complexities of the ESG. So I guess let's take this opportunity to apply these learnings and make real, lasting changes in our organizations, and more to come in coming weeks. Thanks, Noor.
Thank you so much, Waqas. I know Hina wants to say a few words as well. So Hina, over to you. We can't see you, but go ahead. You're muted. Okay. I can't see Hina. Shafaq, can you see Hina online? I don't see her.
No, I
I see
cannot.
that she has left, I guess.
Uh-oh. Okay, so we're so sorry, but for sure, this is not the end. We are carrying on with the ESG live session. When's the next session, Siam? That is my question as well. So, Shafaq, I've been put on the spot. So when's the next session?
We are inshallah planning the next session on IT and telecommunications on 12th of October.
Wonderful. So that's in a week's time, Saim. I hope that answers your question. But stay tuned for the LinkedIn pages. We share it on all of our partners' pages. You can see them at the background, the Brown Network, Mindworks, Cognition Hub, IFRS Lab, and Hammersnet. And yeah, am I missing somebody? No, I'm not. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time on a Saturday. I appreciate with all the internet disturbances and the rain in Islamabad, but I appreciate all of you taking our time. Do let us know what other areas and topics can we bring the ESG discussions forward to you. Special thanks, Asad Saab, Osman Saab, and Zonish for taking our time and being here. And we look forward to more concerted discussions with you, and hopefully we'll be learning a lot along the way as well. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll see you soon. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you so much, Noor, and thank you so much, Groundwork, Ground Network, Mindworks International, and everybody who joined. And thank you so much, because I'm sorry I just got disconnected when I started speaking. But you know, I can see the challenges in Pakistan of internet and everything. But despite every